Flippin' Out Radio.
It's real.
Ah, you knucklehead.
Turnpike Throwdown.
They're both from Jersey, but the similarities stop there.
All right.
A Flippin' Out Radio production.
With your hosts,
James Flippin and Jeff Costello.
This is the Turnpike Throwdown.
Welcome, everybody, to the Turnpike Throwdown. Jeff Costello.
And James Flippin.
Very excited to have a great guest on the line. He's the award-winning writer, radio, and TV host. James, I'm not sure if there's anything he doesn't know about the Eagles. He literally wrote the Eagles Encyclopedia. It's the one and only Mr. Ray Didinger. All right, well, Mr. Didinger, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
First off, Mr. Didinger, I just had to let you know I am living and working up in the New York area right now. I'm a native of South Jersey, born and bred. And when you look back at where you grew up and what you don't have anymore when you do move, there's a few things that anyone will miss. You get homesick. At the top of my list, the top three would have to be in order. One, my mom's cooking. Two, Eagles postgame live, because I can't get enough of you guys after the game, getting to see the press conference of Andy talking in a low monotone voice about how they should have used the clock more in a more efficient manner. And then three would be Wawa. So just to let you know, you're up there in pretty high company.
That's very high company.
Yeah. So
yeah, we've been doing the pre and post game. Well, not pre-game throughout, but the post game since Comcast came on, which is now 12 years ago, I guess. And the cast has changed a little bit, but it's been basically the same four guys now for 8 years or so, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, I never thought that a post-game show could work with no video, no highlights, none of that. I mean, just basically press conferences and four panelists talking. But I guess it speaks to how much Philadelphia is into their Eagles that a show like that can actually fly here. I don't know that it would everywhere, but it works in Philadelphia.
Yeah, people love it, though.
No, Mr. Didinger, I went to school down in Delaware, so I was definitely in Philly country, and I watched that post-game decent amount. And, yeah, I have to say, it is kind of that unique style. It's mostly just opinion kind of coming at you. Very Philadelphia, I would say. So
very much so.
Got a unique
but it
character.
Works.
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Didinger, obviously a lot of the focus right now in the NFL is on the lockout, as expected. But we're the eternal optimists here on the Turnpike Throwdown, and as we assume that football will eventually start one day, we look forward to the draft. It is April now. What would you say are the Eagles' most pressing needs going into the draft, the first few picks? What do you think that they're going to focus on?
Well, I think they're the three areas, at least that I would identify would be cornerback, offensive line, specifically offensive tackle, and defensive line, specifically defensive end. Those would be the three main ones in that order. And so then you go into the draft and you just, when your turn comes along, you just, in my view, you just kind of have your players graded. You give everybody a grade. And when your turn comes, you pick the highest rated player in one of those areas of need. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to take, because I had cornerback number one, that you would take a cornerback number one, because the grade on him may not be as good as a grade you have on one of the tackles or one of the ends. It might still be there. So I think your first two picks really should be in those positional areas, and in each case take the player that you have rated the highest. I think, as much as the Eagles have a tremendous need at cornerback, I think it's going to be hard for them to get. I think it's going to be a tough position to draft, because the two best guys are going to be gone so early. I mean, you're going to have to be in the top 10 to get them. And then I think there's a significant drop-off after those two guys. So if you're the Eagles and you're coming up at 23, the top guys are going to be gone. And my guess is that you're probably, the next cornerback that you have that's on the board, I don't think is going to have as high a grade as maybe a tackle or a defensive end. So cornerback is the number one need in my view, but I think they would have to trade up in the top 10 to come out of the first round with a cornerback because of the way this draft talent kind of falls.
Yeah, Ray, going into last year, with the loss of Brian Dawkins, obviously a big-time fan favorite over the years, a lot of the fans were chiming in that, we should get Eric Berry or Earl Thomas, which would have been great, but for the Eagles to have traded up that highly, that's just not their MO. Going into this year, I think that's kind of what you're getting at. It's the same mentality. You take the best player off the board, because I'd read one of your articles or your responses to a question in the Eagles mailbag recently that, when the team ends up reaching, they end up with a guy like a Kevin Allen or a John Harris.
Right. Well, that can happen. And actually last year when they did trade up, when they traded up to 13. I thought it was with the idea in mind of drafting Earl Thomas. I thought when I saw them make the trade and I saw them jump up to 13, I thought, okay, that's what they're going for. And to be frank, I thought that's what they should have done.
Yeah,
and I was, when they came out and they announced they had taken Brandon Graham, I was surprised. I really was. I thought, because I did think there was obviously a huge need for a safety, and I thought Earl Thomas had tremendous ability. I mean, I think Earl Thomas, and it was an unusual draft last year in that I thought you had two safeties in this draft that had the talent to be game-changing players. You don't often have a draft where you have safeties that have that kind of ability. Last year you had two of them in Burry and Thomas. This year you don't have any. I mean, this year there's not a safety in this draft that I would take in the first round, but last year you had two I would have taken in the top 10. I thought the Eagles were going to go up to 13 to get Thomas. I wish they had. But they took Brandon Graham, and people have kind of have thought that I was critical of the choice. I wasn't necessarily critical of Brandon Graham. I was critical of the choice because, number one, I thought they passed on a guy that would have been a better fit for them in Earl Thomas. And number two, while I think Graham had a terrific career at Michigan, I think he has ability, I just don't know that he's a 4-3 player. I mean, I saw him as very much like Lamar Woodley, a guy who I thought was really well suited to play an outside linebacker in a 3-4. I thought coming here and asked to play a defensive end in a 4-3, I didn't think was his strength. So for those two reasons, I was critical of the Eagles' pick last year more than I was critical of Graham himself.
And in a ways, that kind of almost reflects, in my opinion, what the Eagles fans are mistakenly, always given this moniker of, negativity. And when it came to even Donovan McNabb, I don't think that the fans were booing Donovan McNabb so much as they were booing the fact that they weren't getting what was at the time the best running back clearly in years.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, it's been misrepresented that way, I think, as many perceptions about Philadelphia fans are. The national media loves that they have their own image of what they think Philadelphia fans are, and it's just a very easy thing to just kind of put up there. And the Philadelphia fans have become kind of the shorthand for bad behavior. I mean, that's nationally, and so they pick incidents and match them to the stereotype. And I think the Donovan McNabb thing was exactly like that. The fans, they weren't booing Donovan McNabb.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think the fans here had anything against the guy. I don't know if the fans here knew all that much about him, really.
Yeah, precisely.
I mean, what they felt was that they saw the opportunity to get what was considered the best running back to come out of college in a decade. Heisman Trophy winner, the all-time leading rusher in the history of college football, and at a time when the Eagles, I didn't have any good backs. Seemed like a fit. I was actually part of the group that thought they should have taken Ricky Williams. So that was what the fans were booing the decision. They weren't booing the player. Now, on television, the film clips and the highlights, it looks that way, and yeah. I guess Donovan and his family probably took it personally.
Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't meant that way. It was really about the decision. But that's water long since under the bridge.
We're here on the Turnpike Throwdown. We're talking with Ray Didinger, one of the broadcast pioneers of Philadelphia. Ray of both NFL Films and Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia. Ray, I got a question for you. You're talking about trading up in the draft and issues of trying to finagle your position in the draft. Right now, the Eagles, I'd say, are at a position of strength dealing, if not for this lockout. Obviously, Kevin Kolb is a guy who's in high demand, can play the quarterback position. There's clearly a lot of teams that need a quarterback. And Michael Vick has established himself as the starter down in Philadelphia after having that MVP-type season last year. Where do you see the value for Kevin Kolb right now? And if not for this lockout, do you think he might have well been traded already?
I don't know that he would have been traded already because I think they probably would have played it out right down to the draft and let teams bid against each other. His value would have only gone up as word would have gotten around that this team is interested and that team is interested, and there would have been more teams jockeying for position, and the Eagles could have played one offer off the other. And I mean, they would have driven it up, probably not traded them until draft day. I mean, that's how you maximize value of a player. If this had been a normal year, well, it's been anything but a normal year, and it's the Eagles' bad fortune that it's come out this way because, I mean, there are a lot of teams right now. They're looking around for quarterbacks. I mean, I think I was doing just sort of a casual run through, and I had 15, in my view, 15 of the 32 teams could use a quarterback. And this isn't a great draft for quarterbacks. Now that Andrew Luck's decided to go back to Stanford and finish up, all the quarterbacks that are coming out in this draft. I think all have question marks with them. So there's no sure pop franchise guy in this group that a team would invest a number one draft pick in. Somebody will, but there's nobody here that you can do it with great certainty. And the number of veterans that are available, not that great, and question marks in the talent there too. I mean, Carson Palmer wants to be moved, but I mean, he's 31, has his injury issues, and it's been a while since he's had a big year. Donovan McNabb, you saw what kind of a season he went through in Washington. There's question about how much he's going to bring you at this point. I mean, of all the options that are out there, a guy who's young and healthy but has experience, I mean, Kevin Kolb is probably as desirable an option as you're going to get for a team that really wants a quarterback that can step in and play. I mean, the Eagles would be in a tremendously powerful position to move him for this draft, but they can't. We'll know more when the judge in Minnesota hears the request for the injunction and decides whether or not to grant it. The judge grants an injunction, then the lockout comes off, and then you're back to kind of business as usual in the NFL. Players can be signed, they can be traded, you can deal for draft picks. So if that happens, if the injunction is granted, and I kind of think that's more likely than not, then the Eagles can jump in and begin to move. But I think that all the things that Andy Reid said at the owners' meetings recently in New Orleans were exactly the kinds of things he was saying at the owners' meetings a year ago about we're listening to offers for the quarterbacks, teams are interested in their quarterbacks. Well, that was his way of saying we're ready to move Donovan McNabb. And I think everything he was saying in New Orleans was basically that we're ready to move Kevin Kolb when we are able to. So I still think that the lockout will be lifted, and I think the Eagles will trade Kevin Kolb before draft day. That's just sort of it's a guess, but that's my guess.
Right. One quick follow-up question to that. In your own personal opinion, given the potential for a guy like Michael Vick to get injured, and of course we saw that last year where he did get banged up, his style of play is definitely aggressive, going to take the ball on the run, take some tough hits. Do you think it behooves the Eagles more to try to get the value out of Kevin Kolb or to have him on the bench for that event when Michael Vick is going to get injured somewhere along the season?
Well, it depends what that value is. If it proves to be what we think it is, if it gets you another first-round draft pick, or if it gets you up into the top 10, where you could get one of those elite cornerbacks or a top 10 kind of player, then I think you kind of have to do it. I mean, I understand the risk you're taking. I know it's very likely that Michael Vick won't make it through 16 games, but I don't think you can afford to carry a backup guy for an entire year, pass up the opportunity to get a first-round draft pick, maybe a high first-round draft pick, for a guy who may not play, and at the end of the year can leave you as a free agent anyway. I mean, the Eagles, if it doesn't work out this way, if the lockout remains in place and everything is shut down, and you wind up with Kevin Kolb still on the roster, it's not the worst of all possible situations because you have a guy that can come in and play and win games for you, and you got a backup quarterback that's not going to make a whole lot of money. $1.4 million for a backup quarterback in this day and age is certainly a reasonable amount of money. So, I mean, if that's the way it works out, the Eagles will be okay with that. But I think given the opportunity now, if you can move them and you can get first-round value in return, then I think you got to do it. And then, obviously, I don't think you're going to have Mike Kafka as your number two. So then you have to go out and you have to shop around and get another veteran guy to come in and be that number two. And those kind of guys are always available. I mean, Mark Bolger is probably going to be available at some point. Bruce Gradkowski, Matt Moore, guys that have played and had some success in this league and, aren't starters anymore, but guys that can come in and hold the fort until Michael Vick gets back on the field. Those options are always available. So, my guess is based on what I think Kevin Kolb's trade value is going to be if they're able to trade him between now and draft day. If you're talking about a first-round draft pick, I think you got to do it, and then you got to take your chances that either Mike Vick stays healthy or you can sign yourself a veteran who can come in and be an adequate backup.